Greetings and welcome to the No Flimflam Film Fan Special Series Beers and Cheers, where I take a beer from this special German beer advent calendar and pair it up with a recommendation for a holiday film. Now, as you can see from these flaps, we are well along the way. We've been through so much already, but there's still a few left. What's in store for today? Oh no. Oh no. Oh no, we got another dark beer. Oh man. I'll be back. As evidenced by the sudden change in lighting, we're drinking a dark beer today. A Bock, to be precise. A bottom fermented dark beer brewed in the cold seasons, traditionally to be enjoyed during the festivals of springtime. This one comes to us from a nomadic-style brewery that actually doesn't own any of its own facilities and rents and borrows whatever is needed to produce this, hopefully, delicious Bock. Despite being a rather strong type of beer, it actually feels light going in. It's not like a stout. So, kind of deceptive, really, but very enjoyable. Smooth yet firm. It's a nice change of pace compared to the predominantly lager or similar style beers we've mostly been having. I quite like it. This just in, quite literally, my creative partner Vern has interrupted this broadcast to ask me to let him take over the film recommendation for this beer pairing. Now, I don't normally allow this, but he's prepared quite a bit of research, and I just can't say no when he bats those puppy dog eyes at me and throws encyclopedias across the room. So, what follows is now Vern's recommended pairing for this beer. Better be worth it, man. Right, so I'm just going to start reading what he wrote. A dark, strong beer with complex flavor needs a dark Christmas film that can match it in its smooth flavors and mood-influencing substance. While you are free to take the notion of dark Christmas film in any direction you may wish, for me, there is only one film that meets this criteria, one you have almost certainly heard of. You have probably seen it multiple times, a veritable glistening ornament in the festive oeuvre of famed Hollywood director Frank Capra. Oeuvre? Did you mean hors d'oeuvre? In case you haven't figured it out yet, the film that we're discussing is 1946's It's a Wonderful Life, one of the most beloved, well-known, and oft-repeated holiday films of all time. A film which arrived in theaters barely 1 year after the total devastation of World War II. If you don't think of this as a dark film, that's probably because you're only remembering the parts after the angel shows up to distract the main character from ending his own life. The gradual cheering up of George Bailey by presenting him with vivid images of how awful life would be for everyone around him if he weren't there is so repeated in subsequent parodies that you're probably familiar with it, even if you've never seen It's a Wonderful Life. This list made by fans that is probably incomplete shows around 70 examples of rip-offs and derivatives of It's a Wonderful Life, and it's still growing. This story has been repeated. What has not been repeated as much, however, is the part of the story where the very Frank Capra-esque everyman, George Bailey, a good, sincere person who only wants to do right by everyone around him, finds himself so hopelessly crushed and tossed aside by capitalist greed that he finds no way forward for himself. And yes, I did say capitalist on purpose. The word is really important here. No, this isn't some fringe, politicized conspiracy theorist rant. This is based on actual documented evidence of an FBI investigation into anti American themes in the film It's a Wonderful Life. You see, during the time of this film's release, political paranoia was at a perilous peak. The FBI had agents assigned, paid on federal tax dollars, working on federal time to investigate possible anti American themes in pieces of art, especially Hollywood works. And if they found that something was subversive, they could take action. They could refer the person to the House Un American Activities Committee in Congress for further investigation and possible punishment. These investigations resulted in hundreds of people not just losing their jobs, but losing the ability to work. And for some, like silent film legend Charlie Chaplin, for example, it wasn't just a matter of losing jobs. Their immigration status got revoked and they were banished from living in the United States altogether. And for Charlie Chaplin, this comes several years after he self financed, wrote, directed, scored, and starred in the most famous anti Nazi propaganda film ever made. Made even at a time before the US government was pushing entertainers to create anti fascist wartime propaganda. Kind of makes you wonder which side the government was really on. As for It's a Wonderful Life, the FBI report found that it employed common communist propaganda techniques. For example, making the villain of the story a greedy banker was tarnishing to values or institutions judged to be particularly American, and centralizing the story around a good man struggling in the midst of a financial crisis was a subtle attempt to magnify the problems of so called common man in society. Or, in other words, promoting values or institutions judged to be particularly anti American or pro communist. In the FBI's worldview at the time, selfish, rich, and powerful equals good American. But struggling common man trying to do his best for the community equals dangerous commie. According to the FBI, the film was subversive. And so they passed along the report to Congress, to the infamous House Un American Activities Committee for further review. And if the committee had decided, they could have brought in, subpoenaed, forced people involved in the making of It's a Wonderful Life to come in and answer questions, face grilling interviews, potentially end up blacklisted. Thankfully, however, Congress decided to take no further action, and It's a Wonderful Life and its creators were left alone. Much of the wording I've chosen on this FBI investigation is taken directly from a Smithsonian Magazine article quoting research compiled by Professor John A. Noakes, respected scholar on the policing of political protest and researcher of the history of the FBI and its Hollywood surveillance regime. If you'd like to know more, check out the links I provide in the description below this video. Perhaps the Congressional Committee decided not to pursue further investigations against It's a Wonderful Life because they knew that the award-winning, widely successful, influential director of the film, Frank Capra, was not only far removed from communism on the political spectrum, but actually a lifelong conservative Republican. In fact, he had a history of speaking out against the very same community-focused politics that many of his characters would champion. For him, it seemed selflessly working for the public good was something that any decent person should just naturally want to do. And any effort from government to address societal ills or to encourage such behavior would just be an overreach. Too much. Whether it's government programs for the lower classes to help them rise up to a level of comfort that allows the time and resources required for community involvement, or whether it's perhaps tooling laws and agencies to limit the excessive damages caused by the selfish greed of the rich and powerful. In either case, the approach to Capra would seem perhaps like too much government involvement. Sure, a solid social safety net and consumer protections would have prevented George Bailey from feeling so despondent or being susceptible to banking greed. But that's beside the point. Who needs government? People can just be verbally or artistically encouraged, or perhaps shamed, into treating others better. Something Capra had to keep trying across decades of film work. Look, I'm not here to pass judgment on this dangerously naive worldview that can only really be held by a person with a degree of privilege unavailable to most racial or religious minorities. I'm just here to talk holiday films. So, let's talk film. It's a Wonderful Life, as has often been mentioned, was not an initial success, despite being nominated for Best Picture at the Academy Awards. In fact, in its initial box office run, it didn't even break even. It was a loss. It only became a hit with audience many years later through decidedly anti-American means. Well, that is, if we are to believe that the FBI's individualistic capitalist understanding of America is to be the national standard. In 1974, the film's copyright was up for renewal, but the studio that held the rights just didn't bother to apply. It may have been a clerical error, it may have been some misunderstanding, but they didn't apply for the renewal, and so it lapsed. And It's a Wonderful Life became part of the public domain, meaning that anybody could show it, anybody could use it, anybody could watch it, and nobody had to pay anything to any copyright holder because nobody had the copyright. It became the kind of public commodity that George Bailey would have preferred. This free status remained for about 20 years until changes to the law enabled the studio to take back the copyrights and start once again to profit off it and control who gets to use the film. But during those free 20 years, it was free to show, and you better believe that television stations around the country took advantage of this great free piece of media, and it got played and played and played over and over again, and so a significantly wider audience discovered It's a Wonderful Life than would have otherwise been possible in a typical copyright regime. So drink up, comrades, and let's toast to those classically un-American virtues like empathy and compassion, and hope the FBI doesn't find out. If you've got a dark bock in your hand, pair it up with some quality commie cinema created by a conservative just trying to craft a good story about good people.